All right, welcome back to another edition of the Week in Review, our second edition out of the studio and on location here at the Colleton County Courthouse in Walterboro, South Carolina. FITSNews has been here for the last 2 weeks covering the Palmetto State's trial of the century, the double homicide trial of a disbarred lawyer and accused killer, Alex Murdaugh. Now, this case has drawn international attention, and we're going to take you on a lighthearted tour of that international attention here in just a minute as we give you a glimpse at the media circus that's following this trial here in Walterboro. Beyond that, we're going to have a fun look at 2024 presidential politics, which of course runs right through South Carolina. People first in the South, the Palmetto State, one of the stars of that Republican nominating fight. But then we're going to get into some detail, people. This is a jarring trial, a graphic trial. We're going to take you through the latest developments in the state's case against Alex Murdaugh, which is again concluding its second week here in Walterboro. We're going to sit down with Jen Wood, our lead researcher, our research director, in fact, to walk you through the latest developments in that case. All that and much more coming your way on our Week in Review. All right, if you haven't been to the circus that is the Murdaugh Murders, Crime, and Corruption Saga's main event, the double homicide trial of accused killer Alex Murdaugh, we thought we'd bring the circus to you. We wanted to take you inside the media coverage of this trial. We're going to start here, and Dylan, he's going to get the panorama. This is the media lot, people. This is all press. Let's take a walk, shall we? Television, 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 satellite, television, television. Court TV, they're very important, providing the live stream. In fact, the cables that run through this shed back here, that is the live stream. So if you're watching this, no matter where you're watching, that's where it's coming from. Now over here, I've got to be honest, I spent a little time over here, the luxury accommodations of the Taj Mahal. That's right, 3 portable restrooms, 1 for boys, 2 for girls, and folks, the music selection in the Taj Mahal, just so relaxing. And yeah, brought the Beamer. But anyways, we keep rolling. Let's take a look at all these satellite trucks. I mean, we're literally just getting started on this tour, so come on. The FITSNews mobile headquarters. It's where we've been living and working for the past few weeks. Check it out. As you turn around, you can see we are on a front row trajectory. There's the Colleton County Courthouse right there. But hey, keep going. We're just getting started. Watch the cables. Cables everywhere, folks. TV sets, live shots up in here. Court TV's live broadcast. But keep going. Check this bank of cameras down here, people. Don't forget Riley from News 2. How's it going? Rocking it out. By the way, the courthouse, in case you didn't know, designed by Robert Mills, the same guy who designed the Washington Monument. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Right?
That last week, was?
Man, repeating. Anyway, pay no attention to that Confederate Memorial Monument there in the front of it, as Dylan probably zooms in on it. That's right, that's right. Rolling live, LTX in the house, Columbia. If I get run over, does that improve the ratings? Possibly. Dylan's nodding. Let's do it. Let's try it. Where we're headed now is to the mobile command center for the law enforcement agencies and prosecutors who are managing this trial. We'll maneuver through here, Dylan. So, if you've been watching at various points during these proceedings, you'll see attorneys get up, walk out of the court very quickly to fetch some paper, fetch a witness, you name it. Where are they going? Right over here, folks. This is the mobile command center for the South Carolina Attorney General's office's team. Theirs is a little bigger than ours, right? Not much though, right? But this is where all the planning is going. This is where the witnesses are staying. This is where all of the meetings between breaks in the proceedings are held. That's the law enforcement and prosecutorial headquarters right there, folks. But keep going. Hey, we still got press to look at. Come on. This is also, by the way, the location of the food trucks. They're just over our shoulder. We'll do a whole story on them next week, but I've been in a little trouble with the food trucks, so I can't go back down there right now. Eating a few too many burgers in case you can't tell. Got to get back to the home cooking. Right, now for those of you who haven't been following this trial, you don't know that reporters are not allowed to take any of our modern day tools into the courthouse. No cell phones, no laptops, no tablets. You can only take recording devices and basically a legal pad and a paper. So a lot of reporters have chosen not to go into the courtroom. They'd rather come cover the trial from this area, which is the media center. Come on, let's take a look at it. And here we are, folks, the media center. I'm going to be quiet because a lot of folks are in here working. But this is where people are covering the trial. So there you have it, folks. A tour of the media circus here in Walterboro, South Carolina, where the Murdaugh murders, crime, and corruption saga is the main event. The double homicide trial of Alec Murdaugh clearly has drawn a little attention. All right, so now that you've seen the circus covering the Murdaugh murders, crime, and corruption saga as a main event, we're going to take a quick break from Murdaugh coverage and talk national politics, which, as it often does, comes straight through South Carolina, including, yes, the front porch of the Low Country here. I'm talking, of course, about the big announcement this week from former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley that she is running for the presidency of the United States. Haley will announce her campaign on February 15 in Charleston, becoming the second announced candidate for this office. Now, who's the first? Former U.S. President Donald Trump, who has a combative history with Haley, although Trump told reporters in Columbia last weekend that he told Nikki Haley, when she called him prior to her announcement, that she should run if that's what her heart told her to do. Now, will Trump continue to be nice to Haley as the campaign progresses? We will have to wait and see on that. But some quick numbers to look at. Where does Haley start on the national stage in terms of her support? Well, the answer to that is not a very strong position. According to the aggregate polling data from Real Clear Politics, which covers nationwide Republican electorate, Haley is currently drawing 3.2% support. Now, that's not good. It's also about 10 times less what Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is drawing. And DeSantis has emerged among many Republican voters as the clear top alternative to Trump, who, while struggling of late after a disappointing midterm election that many attributed to him for Republican losses, or rather Republican gains that didn't materialize, Trump's still hovering at about 45 to 48% nationally, depending on what poll you look at. Now, what are these candidates doing in South Carolina? Shirley Haley, who was governor here for 6 years, a state representative before that, surely she's doing a little better in South Carolina, you would expect, right? Well, a little bit. Haley is currently drawing the support of about 11.2% of Republican voters. You can come on, represent Walterboro. That's right. About 11.2% of Republican primary voters, and that puts her in fourth place amongst South Carolina GOP primary voters. She's trailing U.S. Senator Tim Scott, who's a little over 14%. She's trailing DeSantis, who's at around 26%, and well behind Trump, who's polling at around 45 to 46% here in South Carolina. Those numbers are according to the Trafalgar Group, which has been incredibly accurate, particularly in its South Carolina polling. So clearly, Governor Haley has a lot of work to do if she wants to become a top-tier candidate. Now, should we count her out? As I've said many times, the answer to that question, a resounding no. Not only is Haley one of the most ambitious politicians you will ever see, but the former UN ambassador has a wealth of support to draw on, institutional support, including neoconservative voters, including those who support Israel. Look, the borough's representing people. I'm digging it. That's right. Rocket Walterboro. But going back to Haley, don't underestimate her, because those are some serious financial powerhouse constituencies, folks. And the governor can draw significant financial resources from that to get her message out and raise her stature nationwide and here in South Carolina. Again, FITSNews has been covering First in the South politics from the beginning, 2012, 2016, 2020, and you know we're going to be there in 2024. And yes, if you're going to ask the question about Nikki Haley, I've got one answer, people. It depends on what the meaning of the word is. Keep it tuned though to FITSNews for the very latest on the 2024 presidential election in South Carolina and beyond, where we got you covered on all that political news. Represent. Now, what y'all following down here, girls?
Huh?
What y'all following down here?
We following this murder trial. We gonna be on the news.
That's all right. Y'all can be on the news. What you think?
So I told my mama not to come down here, and she swears she want to keep up with the tea. And I just feel like He probably innocent until proven guilty.
That's right.
That's right.
Do you
That
think
is
he did
accurate.
I don't know if he did it or not. I haven't been keeping up with how everybody else was.
Free Alex. All right.
Yes. I just feel like if he did it, then they're gonna find him guilty. If he didn't, then not.
You got faith in our justice system. I like that. Thank y'all.
You're
That's right.
welcome.
Talk to us anytime. Y'all have a good one. Free Alex. So there you go. Alec Murdaugh with some support here in Walterboro. There you go. A little impromptu interview.
So one of the reasonable explanations is there are two people there, there are two guns there, one's a shotgun, one's an AR, and we now see that AR is being shot from way up here, correct?
Ms. Maggie and Big Red over here, Mr. Alec, I mean, they treated you as family, didn't they?
That's correct. They did.
You know, I really can't remember what I did Monday. I know I went to work.
And clearly, one reasonable explanation is two shooters.
I was at my office in Hampton. You know, I mean, I was just at my office doing
Legal work.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Maggie was like a second mom to you?
Yes, sir.
Could someone have been a lookout there? They went there to kill Paul, and that's the lookout. Maggie surprised them. They thought she was gone.
I'm sure I can go back and probably recreate some specifics if you need me to, but I can't like sit here and recall on the top of my head exactly what I was working on. I know one thing I was working on was we had some big motions coming up in a Dominion Energy case. I was getting ready for those.
And Mr. Alec was like a second dad?
Yes, sir, he was.
There was what appeared to may have been a footwear impression on Maggie's calf, correct?
I couldn't say that was a footwear impression, just an impression.
I'm a defendant in a civil case involving my son. I told you about the boat wreck.
Yes, sir.
And there were some motions coming up in that on Thursday, and I was mostly just getting ready for those things.
So the procedures followed were not the procedures recommended by every agency and in your agency, correct?
If I had realized that was footwear on scene, I would have documented it properly, yes.
And he said he was working on some motions in the Dominion Energy case, and then also where he's personally a defendant in the boat case. Is that correct?
That is correct,
And that's
yes,
what he
sir.
said he was doing the day of the murders. Is that right?
That is correct, yes, sir.
I know Paul had been getting some threats and getting some being assaulted from, you know, the boat.
You were asked about the boat wreck. Were you aware that Paul had been charged in that boat wreck?
I was.
Were you aware that Alec Murdaugh had been sued in that boat wreck?
I was.
What was your perception of Alec's wealth? Did you believe he was a fairly wealthy man?
Yes, sir.
She was not there when Paul and I left to go mess around.
Okay.
So, you know, it was sometime after that.
This is a chicken. Come here, Cash. Cash. Quit.
Did you have a conversation later in the day with Alec?
I did. Around 4 o'clock, my phone rang, and I remember that because I had been under the impression Alec was going to leave and go to the hospital or leave to deal with his father. And around 4 o'clock, my office extension rang, and at that point, he was asking me for some information on his 401k balances because he stated he was working on some financials for the hearing on the boat accident that was later in the week.
So after y'all got finished riding around, try to take me through the rest of the evening.
You know, at some point we were all back at the house together. Maggie had gotten home, and, you know, we sat down, we ate supper.
You recognize Paul's voice?
Yes, sir.
You recognize Maggie's voice?
Yes, sir.
Just out of curiosity, target practice, what y'all shooting?
Just a little bottle. What gun?
Yeah.
A .22 Magnum.
When did you find out about the murders?
I initially found out through the rumor mill around 10:30 or 11 o'clock the evening of them, but I did not get confirmation until I received a text from the partner roughly 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Can you point out Alec Murdaugh, the person whose voice you recognize in this video in this courtroom, please?
Sitting right there in the gray jacket.
Please let the record reflect.
Who stands out in your mind, besides the boat incident, who stands out in your mind that would want to come after Paul and or Maggie?
That's my understanding, yes.
In the wake of the boat case, did you and the partners have a discussion about what to do about getting to the bottom of these Ferris fees?
We did. We did not the week of the murders because pretty much our office shut down the week of the murders, and then his father also passing away.
Is he one of your best friends?
He is.
Is this a hard day for you?
Yes, sir.
Were you aware that the Carlton County Sheriff's Department had issued a statement to the public saying there's nothing to be afraid of? People, this is not something that you should view as a threat.
The one thing I remember, I don't know how much detail y'all want, so if I start talking about something that you don't need.
Were you shocked by that?
Yes.
Scared?
Yes.
Worried?
Yes.
Worried for Alec?
Worried for everybody, yes, especially Alec.
Did they have an explanation for anything? I mean, at that point, was there some theory about what happened?
When y'all rode around the farm, what were y'all in the truck or?
Well, we were actually in 2 trucks. We rode in one truck, and then we rode in another truck some.
No, sir, I'm not aware of that media release.
Alec was distraught and upset and not in the office much, and nobody wanted to harass him about nothing that we thought was really missing.
How is your relationship with Maggie?
As good as it could possibly be.
Let's play it. Please, Doug. Exhibit 243 and up.
It's tough. It's just so bad. They did it so bad. I think he shot 2 times and I shot 1 time.
You recognize Alec's voice?
Yes, sir.
100%?
Yes, sir.
So it's possible that you're sitting there with a guy who's now been charged with murder on June 10th in the interview, the father, the only one in the circle, and he says, I did him so bad, and you can't tell the jury you even wrote it down on a piece of paper.
I don't recall if I actually made a physical note of it or not, sir.
Hey, she was a wonderful girl and a wonderful wife. And she was a great mother. She didn't work. And she always said it was her job since she was privileged enough not to work. She was going to make sure she took care of me and the boys. And I mean, she did everything.
And specifically, with Alex's phone, what did you discover when you're comparing these phone records to the phone itself, the call log?
She did absolutely everything. I'm sorry.
No, you have every right to do that.
On the date in question on June 7th, I only saw 2 FaceTime calls on the phone extraction, and I saw a series of around 73 phone calls on the Verizon call detail record. I think we're both suffering from some math phobia here, Lieutenant Dove. We're going to do that one more time.
When was the last time he saw Maggie and Paul? What did he tell you?
When he was eating supper.
Back it up and play it in real time again, Doug. Real time.
Okay. Not that I recall means.
I don't remember. I wasn't focused on what was on the media.
Okay.
It's just so bad. They did it so bad.
Did you hear now, they or I?
I will still testify that my hearing, I hear I.
What was your perception of Alec's wealth? Did you believe he was a fairly wealthy man?
Yes, sir.
A matter I'd like to address with the court. During and throughout the questioning that the defense has been doing, and including one question that was asked here today about any reason why Alec may kill anyone.
No, sir, I'm not aware of that media release.
This motive, by the way, is the most ludicrous. He's about to be discovered as having stolen some money that afternoon.
We were going to replant some sunflowers the next day. Okay. And so he was calibrating, doing and getting everything ready.
So he goes home and butchers his wife and son to
You
distract.
argued that before.
But what I'm saying is, this idea.
You've argued it before. You've called it ludicrous before.
He and I could knock around, and we knocked around for, just doing things we like to do out there.
Financial information would come in. Simply asking this young man, who they asked about his relationship with Alec and Paul and everybody.
So they left and went down to the kennels.
Well, Maggie went to go to the kennels.
Okay, Paul left.
And I'm assuming, Paul left because of,
Gotcha.
what happened.
All right. And so if a lawyer earns fees, is it appropriate at all for those fees to go directly to the lawyer as opposed to going through the law?
Well, let me ask you back on June 10th. Why didn't you ask him right then and there when he said, I did him so bad? Why didn't you ask him, what do you mean by that, Alec?
And is there, other than this overlapping situation, is there any other way that you're aware of that could have removed that gap in phone call logs?
If the user went in and manually removed it themselves.
Okay. But there's no other automatic process other than what we've already discussed?
No, sir.
Is that a hard rule to understand?
No.
Anybody ever have a problem with that rule or not understand it?
No.
Pretty easy and hard and fast rule in that firm, correct?
That's right.
If you get the money written straight to you, what is that?
The money's taken straight to you?
Yeah.
That would be stealing it.
Stealing. All right.
So what were the things going through your mind when you heard or misheard, I did him so bad? I mean, like, I wasn't a good dad? I spoiled him?
I had the impression that a car pulled up.
Okay.
And
had you woken up by that time, but hadn't left for your mom's?
Yep.
Okay.
But it wasn't much time in between there because I left pretty damn close. It wasn't much time between me waking up and me leaving the house.
Or I killed him. I mean, what was going through your mental note?
There was a mental note that it was definitely something that we needed to follow up on and ask at a later time.
After we found some other misappropriations and we had confronted Alec and he had resigned, we ended up having more conversations with Chris Wilson right after that, and Chris admitted that he did not have all the money.
What you observed Alec's relationship was starting with you. What was his relationship with you?
We had a good relationship. I mean, he treated me like one of his own.
All right, so we're going to close out this edition of the Week in Review with a recap of everything that we heard from the second week of testimony and evidence here at the Murdaugh Murders, Crime, and Corruption Saga's main event, Jen Wood. What an insane week.
It was crazy. Hard to even keep up with.
Almost impossible to keep up with because, as you know, we had not only the trial, the double homicide trial, but a trial broke out within the trial, didn't it?
Exactly.
Walk us a little bit through how that happened, what that involves.
So we still have some outstanding pretrial motions that the defense and prosecution agreed at the beginning of the trial. Instead of resolving, they're going to resolve as they come up during the course of the trial.
Wish they'd have done that ahead of time.
Yeah, me too.
But go ahead.
Still wondering why that didn't happen. So one of those pretrial motions, which is regarding prior bad acts, sorry.
None of us can talk.
No, we're very tired. Came up this week in the course of testimony, and they kind of had to take some time and deal with that outside of the presence of the jury.
Do you think that this has been disruptive to jurors? Because the state's case was humming. I mean, it was moving. Jurors were buying into it. There was cell phone evidence that clearly painted a narrative, not only of the time of these graphic homicides, but again, Alec Murdaugh and his alibi, and we saw that alibi completely destroyed this week.
Shattered, like it's gone.
How did that happen? What was it that shattered that alibi, Jim?
So this week was the first week that we had testimony regarding the cell phone data that was taken off of Alec, Maggie, and Paul's phones. And that testimony was damning for Alec. We saw how many steps Maggie took. We saw when Maggie and Paul stopped moving. We saw their last phone calls, their last read text. We also saw that Alec deleted 73 calls from his phone after the homicides before he turned his phone over on June 10th.
Not a pretty picture for the defendant in this case. And Jen, I was in there for much of that testimony. The jury absolutely riveted, absolutely absorbed by this testimony. They were following the cell phone data. It's relatable. We all have these devices. it's personable. It ties it back to who we are, everything we do. People relate to it.
That night we were all looking at our phones like, woo!
Can't believe it's tracking all this
yeah.
stuff. But the other thing I noticed is the jurors were absorbing and digesting that cell phone data. It was clear in their minds. They were picturing the final moments of these two people's lives who were just, as the defense attorney himself has said, butchered in this just horrific scene. Now, as we're trying to track down and make sense of what happened that evening, the state obviously advancing a theory. Mm-hmm. It's just a theory.
It's a theory.
They've got to prove it, again, beyond a reasonable doubt. And as they were making strides in doing that, including that testimony from Rogan Gibson, Paul's friend.
Heartbreaking testimony. It was very difficult to listen to.
Rogan Gibson was the young man who was texting with Paul and calling with Paul literally less than 10 minutes before he died.
Yeah, he was, Rogan's dog was at Paul's, at the kennels at Moselle. And Paul was texting him video because they thought that the dog had a hurt tail. And that was the last communication that Rogan ever had from Paul. And you could tell he was very heartbroken over it.
And state witnesses, agents with the State Law Enforcement Division walked through in meticulous detail the timing of these messages, literally down to the second. And there was, an 8-second gap between the last read text by Maggie Murdaugh and then the moment that those cell phones went dead forever.
Right. No movement after that time, no more red text. There was changes in the orientation on Maggie's phone, but that was it.
Jury clearly impacted by that. You could see it in their faces. They were following that. It hit them, again, not just because it's a device we all know about and use every day, but again, they knew that this was the end of these two lives.
I saw a tweet. Somebody said it's like Maggie and Paul were telling their story.
Testifying from the grave.
Yes, there it is.
That was former Attorney General Charlie Condon, who is the WCIV analyst for this trial. Former Attorney General Condon, an expert on these matters, obviously tried a ton of big cases himself. As this thing goes forward, Jen, after that amazing day for the prosecution where they blew up Alec Murdaugh's alibi, they presented this heartfelt testimony from Rogan Gibson, his friend. Everything was going their way. In fact, people were saying that was the day that the state won the case.
Right.
But then, again, this parallel proceeding, this trial within the trial broke out, and we've got all this financial evidence, which is incredibly damning for Alec Murdaugh, but the jury hadn't heard it yet.
No, they know nothing about it until the judge determines what portion of that evidence he's going to allow the jury to hear.
And I did ask some sources that are close to the prosecution if they felt that switching of the bifurcation again of that trial within the trial, if that blunted their momentum, if that kept the jurors a little bit distracted when they were, again, starting to buy into the state's narrative. I was told, nope, they've got some witnesses that are to come that are going to tie all this together. And then, of course, the closing arguments. We've heard the opening statements. That's sort of like a movie trailer. The closing arguments are like the movie. And so I guess we're going to see the movie from both sides as this thing moves forward. Jen, the other thing I wanted to ask you about, you were watching very closely that financial testimony. Assuming it gets in, and again, I think everyone agrees that the testimony of Chris Wilson, Alec Murdaugh's close friend, is going to come in.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Chris Wilson and why his testimony is so important.
So Chris Wilson was one of the people, so he's an attorney out of Bamberg, South Carolina, and he was had a case with Alec that settled. And in the course of that settlement, Alec had Chris write the checks for the disbursement for that case when it settled to Alec directly instead of to the law firm, PMPED, as it should have been. And that was all coming to a head on June 7, 2021. And Chris Wilson is one of the last people to talk to Alec before the bodies of Maggie and Paul were found. And Jeannie Seckinger, who also testified, confronted him about those fees. She's the controller at PMPED.
The day of the murders.
The day of the murders. So that seems to be kind of pointing to direction of motive. You know, when you talk about prior bad acts coming to motive, that to me makes clear sense.
Absolutely. And Seckinger, in her testimony, there was a chilling moment where she discussed confronting Alec Murdaugh that day, and she said that he shot her a glare, a mean look that was something she had never seen from him in the 23 years that they had worked together. If that kind of testimony gets in, Alec Murdaugh's in trouble. Another bit of testimony from Chris Wilson, that $192,000 that Alec Murdaugh stole from him, that he later confessed. He said he shit him up was the term. We'll go ahead and say that. I don't know if we're supposed to say that, but that's what was said in open court. New expression that's apparently on some coffee mugs down here. But
apparently.
But an acknowledgement, an admission. And one of the bombs that dropped late this week regarding another admission from another potential witness, Curtis Eddie Smith. What did we learn about Curtis Eddie Smith this week, Jen?
Curtis Eddie Smith is going to have some interesting testimony if he gets on stand, and he has been subpoenaed. Apparently, Alec, was it on the day of the roadside shooting?
Day of the roadside shooting.
Admitted to shooting Paul and Maggie?
That is what we've been told. That's what sources on both sides actually have indicated is coming in the event he testifies.
Yeah. Do you think he's actually going to take the stand?
I'll tell you what, Curtis Eddie Smith is a lot like that controversial blood spatter evidence at the beginning of this trial that dominated discussion leading up to the trial.
We still don't know the outcome of that.
We don't know if that's going to come in or not. Curtis Eddie seems a lot like that. It's a sword that would likely cut both ways.
Yeah.
He could probably provide some compelling testimony, but then again, it seems like the defense would have a field day.
I think they would have a field day. Yeah.
His credibility.
Yeah.
Or lack thereof. Jen, as we move forward with this trial, obviously we're hoping to get things on a single track again next week. Judge Clifton Newman has indicated that he's going to take the weekend to consider everything that's been presented to him so far. But on Monday, we're going to hear from another witness in camera. And again, for those of you who are following this, in camera, it's Latin. It basically means in a chamber. It refers to testimony in the trial that is outside the presence of the jury. Some cases, it's actually outside the presence of everybody.
Yes.
But here, Judge Newman has allowed that to be presented to the public, presented in open court, just outside the presence of the jury. But we're going to hear more in-camera testimony next week from
Mark Tinsley, who represents the Beach family. Now, the Beach family, if you're not familiar with the story, in February 2019, Paul Murdaugh was allegedly driving a boat with 5 of his friends in it, crashed the boat at I think 1:30, 2 a.m. in the morning, and one of his friends, Mallory Beach, tragically died. And her family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the Murdaugh family. Mark Tinsley represents her family. So Mark Tinsley is going to be testifying because just 3 days after the murders of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh, financial disclosures were due in that boat crash case.
Alec Murdaugh was going to have to reveal all of this financial information that could have potentially exposed him.
Could have.
And that would have, as we heard testimony earlier today, if he was exposed, that would have cut him off from some of the ready access to cash.
At Palmetto State Bank.
At Palmetto State Bank, which again lent this guy $750,000.
What they called extremely under-collateralized loan.
Extremely under-collateralized. I want one of those. The other thing they mentioned was that in the weeks after the murder, leading up to that roadside shooting in September, that Murdaugh had run his account to a $350,000 deficit, and they just dropped $400,000 into that account. Creighton Waters, the prosecutor, said it was the most generous overdraft plan he'd ever seen.
Thinking about opening an account up over at Palmetto State Bank.
I don't know if they're going to let you or I get away with that. I don't know if they're going to let you or I get away with that. But Jen, just an amazing, we knew that this story was complicated.
Yeah.
We knew it was layered. So we obviously had to expect that the trial would be the same way. But it's amazing how closely people are following every little detail of this thing.
Yeah, I mean, people are really, it's intriguing. I've been doing it for a year and a half, so I can see people like why they would be so interested.
Yeah, so many layers to this story. And again, we've been here 2 weeks now. It is a, Murdaughpalooza, they call it. It is a carnival atmosphere. We have been having fun doing our jobs, working together and working hard, working with other journalists down here. But again, it is important. These are lives here, not just the lives of Maggie and Paul, but we saw today some of, I think, the most heart-wrenching testimony from a young man named Tony Satterfield, who took the stand. Tony Satterfield is the son of Gloria Satterfield, who was the Murdaugh's housekeeper for many years. One of Alec Murdaugh's financial victims, wasn't he, Jen?
Yep. So Gloria was the housekeeper of Murdaugh's for, I think they said 20 years, and she fell at Moselle and sustained severe injuries. She died about a month later. and Alec agreed to help her 2 sons sue him for insurance money, and then he proceeded to steal it.
Literally stole, what was it?
$4.2 million.
$4.2 million from this poor young man and his brother. And I spoke with Tony Satterfield in the court today. Just an amazing young man. I asked him, I said, you know, have you had any closure here? Do you know the truth about what happened to your mother? He told me no. He discussed the ongoing criminal investigation into his mom's death, because that's an open homicide investigation.
Yep.
And I asked him, because there have been reports about potentially exhuming her body, and I asked him, I said, you know, is that something that you're okay with? He told me, I don't have a choice. But I asked him, I said, if it'll get you that closure, if it gets you those answers, would you do it? And he said, grab me and my friends a shovel. So it seems like he's all in to find the truth.
Yeah.
The other thing, interesting, Jen, I asked him, I pointed to Alec Murdaugh across the court, and I asked him, I said, what do you think should happen to that man? He told me, that's up to the Lord, I don't care. He said, I sleep fine at night, don't know about him. So
wow.
Just an interesting perspective from a young man that's been through absolute hell. But again, it's important to remember these lives, some of the least of these abused by a man who was in a position of immense power, ostensibly immense wealth. Again, just shocking stuff, Jen Wood.
Yeah, it really did drive home this week, the testimony, how many lives have been affected by these murders. It was hard. It was a difficult week emotionally.
And as we heard Tony Satterfield testimony, one of the other things that was so intense was we've seen dozens of letters from law firms on official letterhead, official documents. This kid wrote a handwritten note to Alec Murdaugh asking for help to pay his mom's medical bills. And that handwritten note, just to see it up there, it just brought home the real lives that were destroyed by this man.
Yeah.
And again, this is not alleged. Alec Murdaugh has signed a confession of judgment on that Satterfield case, folks. So this is
we don't have to say alleged on this one.
We don't have to say alleged on that one. And again, that's an example of a prior bad act that could come in.
Absolutely.
To this trial.
Absolutely.
One last note, Jen. What are you thinking on timing for this thing? It feels like we've been here for
it was scheduled initially for 3 weeks. I'm hearing this week that it has been extended, and sources close to the court are telling me that it could be, they're thinking March 10th end date. I don't know. That might just be a lengthy estimate, but.
Well, a lot of it will depend on how many of these financial witnesses are admitted, because again, folks, we've heard all the financial witnesses. Every one of them, we've heard them. But if they're admitted, guess what? They've got to testify again.
They got to go right back in and do it again. And the questions, they parse it down for the motion hearings. So they're not asking them everything that they're going to ask them in front of the jury. So their testimony in front of the jury, if it's allowed, is likely going to be much longer.
We've heard reports that the state could potentially rest its case by the end of this coming week. In the event not many of those financial witnesses come in the event they do come in, potentially a lot longer for the state in its case. The defense, we're told that their case could last a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. So that does put us on that March 10 time frame.
Yep.
Well, we've been here from the very beginning of it. Literally the first news outlet to report on this double homicide way back in June of 2021. We will be here till the end of it. Keep it tuned to FITSNews for the very latest on this saga as we continue to bring you everything you need to know about the Murdaugh murders, crime, and corruption saga here from Walterboro, South Carolina. Jen Wood, so grateful to you for running the live feed every day.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun. As much fun as it can be with a murder trial. But
and Dylan Nolan doing our live stream.
He
behind
just
the camera, Dylan waved. It's been tough work, but you know what? It needs to be done. And again, as we said from the beginning, it's not just one man on trial, it's an entire system. Do you think the system's holding up okay so far?
So far. We'll see what gets allowed in. So far.
That's right. We've been on it from the beginning, folks. We're going to stay on it till the end. Keep it tuned to FITSNews, and thank you for joining us on this very special edition of the Weekend Review on location from the Walterboro, South Carolina, Colleton County Courthouse. We'll see you next week.